I'd like to call to order a regular meeting of the Watchung Borough Board of Education on May 12th, 2022 at 7 p.m. May we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Welcome to a meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Watchung. Please be advised that this and all meetings of the board are open to the public and media consistent with the Open Public Meetings Act, and that the advance notice required therein has been provided. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Watchung at which formal action may be taken. This meeting is being live streamed on the district website, where a recording of the meeting also will be posted. The public will have an opportunity to be heard as shown on the agenda at points in the meeting provided for the public to address the board. Recording or photographing other than for private personal use requires the consent of parents, guardians whose children may be included in the image. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Barbella,
Here.
Mr. Beccarelli,
Here.
Mrs. Harvey,
Here.
Mr. Ingracia,
Here.
Mr. Kraft,
Here.
Mr. McDonald,
Here.
Mrs. Murad,
Here.
Ms. Advani, not here, Mrs. Sharf.
Here.
We have 8 present.
Okay, can we have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Mr. Pepe, can you please read the reason for us going into executive session?
Whereas the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10:4-11, permits the Board of Education to meet in closed session to discuss certain matters. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Board of Education adjourns to closed session to discuss a matter rendered confidential by federal or state law, student matters. And be it further resolved, the minutes of this closed session will be made public when the need for confidentiality no longer exists. This closed session will be followed by an open session where action will be taken.
Okay, and I just wanted to let everyone know we're not exactly sure as to how long we will be in there. But we'll definitely keep in mind that everyone's out here. Can I have a motion to come out of executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So we'll move on to board member comments. Are there any comments from any board members? Okay, we're going to move on to the superintendent's remarks.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I have just a few brief updates. I'll begin with the COVID news. During the 2-week period after spring break, we've seen a spike in COVID cases at Bayberry. Interestingly enough, though, not at Valley View. And in talking with other superintendents over the course of the last week or so, some districts are also seeing that they're seeing a spike or a surge at the elementary level, but not so much with the older kids. But probably more so, the districts in general are just seeing a surge all around. It's just reflective of what is taking place in the communities and across the state. The Cali report came out late this afternoon, and we are now, based on the data through May 7th, in the orange zone again. So I'm going to encourage everyone to continue practicing safe mitigation strategies and staying home if sick, keeping children home if they are experiencing symptoms. We'll continue to monitor the data But again, we're going to try to minimize disruptions to the students, the staff, and the families. If the circumstances warrant, we may have to make adjustments to our current protocols. We also just received our annual school HIB grades as required by the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights Act. We'll be reviewing them over the course of the next few days and then post them on our district website by May 26th as required by the NJDOE. We also are required to present them at a future board meeting. Last week, we celebrated our teachers, staff, and nurses for Teacher Appreciation Week and Nurse Appreciation Week. So I'm very pleased to welcome 3 of our staff members here this evening. We have Katie Lantier, Brady Dillon, and Sarah Greensweg, who'll deliver a brief presentation for the special services update tonight. So ladies, please come forward whenever you're ready. I think Aaron has the presentation up on the screen already.
Hi, good evening. This is actually my first time addressing the board. I was just hired in December, so thank you for having me. But I am Brady Dillon. I am the new district BCBA.
Hello, Sarah Greensweg. I am the autism teacher at Bayberry.
Hello, I'm Katie Lantier, and I am the preschool disabilities teacher at Bayberry.
So we just wanted to give the board and the community kind of an overview of what autism is, since it's such a hot topic right now in our community and in really the whole world. But autism affects males 4 times more than it does females, which is actually interesting because here in Watchung, we almost have like a 50-50 split of the girls and the boys who have the diagnosis. But those that are diagnosed are considered to have a developmental disability, even if they are not cognitively impaired. Autism occurs 1 in every 44 births in the US. New Jersey has the highest rate of occurrence, which is 1 in every 35. And here in Watchung, based on school age children, it is 1 in every 38 students has a diagnosis of autism. Symptoms typically manifest around 18 months to 3 years old, and it does not discriminate. So, this is a very diverse community culturally, ethnically, and there's no pattern to who gets a diagnosis of autism based on anything other than what we think is genetics, which is some sort of gene mutation. And I'm gonna pass on to Sarah. Next.
Click. So just to talk about the ways that we see autism affect our children, the 4 main ways that it affects it is their communication. So you'll find that it's difficult for them to express their basic needs, wants, feelings, social interaction. You'll also find that they may be outside in the same area as other kids, but it's hard for them to interact appropriately or in the way that they would like to. There's a lot of sensory input needed with students with autism. And the last way is they have very repetitive and restrictive interests of behavior. So you'll hear words like scripting or stimming. Those are all keywords with our community because they get stuck on an idea or they get stuck on a phrase and it kind of just, they stim on it because it brings them some kind of soothing qualities. Symptoms present prior to the age of 3. So one of the first symptoms you typically look for is whether or not your child is responding to their name and making eye contact. That starts as early as when they're babies. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get autism, be diagnosed with autism, but it's usually one of the first things you look for just to kind of get a feel for if that's something you should have on your radar. There are behavioral difficulties. We see them here. We see everyone who has a child with autism typically says yes, that we've had some kind of experience with behaviors. Just my big thing as a teacher of these kids, their behaviors are typically because they cannot communicate. So they're not trying to be mean or ill-willed. They're trying to tell you something. So it typically just means we need to pay a little bit more attention to, their basic needs and wants. Maybe they're not being met. And there are obvious qualitative impairments as well across the board. We see it.
Yeah, good. Aaron's on it. So what do the symptoms look like? So I'm not going to go through all of these, but in a child that is less than 2 years old, Sometimes they are going to be inactive or appear not to be interested in what a typical toddler, infant are interested in. Very irritable and inconsolable. Limited functional communication, like Sarah said, communication, or even for children who speak, if it's not functional, if it's repeating TV shows, movies, things they see on YouTube, that's considered limited functional communication. Limited social responses, so not seeking out toys that are age appropriate, not seeking out siblings, peers, family members, and then unusual sensitivity, either high or low, to their environment. So we have some kids that are very sensitive to hot and cold, while other ones, can be outside with no clothes on in the winter and not react at all. This is something that's really, again, one of the things that parents can notice right away, especially if they have more than one child, because they'll say, I don't understand, like, this is not something that's new to me, like the reacting to loud noises in a way that's not typical. That's just something that is kind of brings the thought of autism that's worth bringing up to the pediatrician if that comes up. Less than 2 years old. Okay.
Okay, so older than 2 years old, which is what we see here in Watchung, because that's our age district. Again, there's very little consistency in their functional communication. And like Brady was saying, typically we'll see a student who watches a TV show might script a conversation that was in that TV show, and that's their way of trying to communicate something that they're either feeling or thinking, and they just don't have the language or communication to be able to do that without the script.
So lots of vocabulary, but it's not functional.
Yeah. So it could, and it's usually repetitive. So there are times my students trick me every once in a while, and they might say something and I'm like, oh, that's great language. And then it's like, they say it the next 4 times and I'm like, it's a script. Okay, got it. So again, conversation skills then are obviously impaired as well. And the big thing is that they can't consistently express their needs and wants, which as an adult, if you imagine not being able to express, when you feel pain or when you're upset or hungry or just those basic needs and wants, I think we can all understand why there might be a little bit of an outburst every once in a while. There's significant distress over even minor changes. So change is a big thing for people in general with autism. They like their routine. They're very routine oriented. They sometimes, and it's different for each child for sure, but sometimes have a hard time when that routine is affected. So it could be something as simple like library is canceled today because we don't have coverage, or we have a field trip today and the whole day might be different, or we're going to eat sometimes even 10 minutes later than we did yesterday. Even something as simple as that as a change could affect the rest of their day.
That's also why remote learning was nearly impossible for this population, just because it was so different than what they were expecting. And it has something to do with Watchung. I mean, obviously, nationwide, this population really, really struggled with the remote learning.
Another reason to feed off of that is there are an immense amount of sensory feedback needs, which again, if you don't have the right equipment, you might not be getting the sensory input that you need. So things to look out for. If you see kids that are spinning in circles, or sometimes even like a physical stim like this, they might be looking for some kind of input, or hitting their head, sometimes hitting their head on things. It's not them having behavior, it's them needing some kind of sensory input. They need something from either you or an object to kind of be able to give them that ability to calm down. So as a fully functioning adult, we can, most of the time, we can tell ourselves, okay, take a break, calm yourself down, come back. They don't have that ability. They don't have those skills. So the way that they present that might look like, banging their head or spinning in a circle or different things like that.
So what do the symptoms look like in our school-age children? High or low pain tolerance. I mean, we have students that asked to go to the nurse on a very regular daily basis over something, as small that we can't even see, or it's, they just bumped into something like this and they're like, oh my God. And we also have other students who have, fallen and, didn't react at all. I've had a significant injury with absolutely no reaction whatsoever. So it's really important for us as staff to be aware of that. They engage others to meet a specific need. So an example is playing with a peer or a sibling to get chased. So they might not have the communication to say, I want to play tag, but they might kind of engage in that behavior of like shoving and then running because they're seeking out that play. The focused and repetitive play and limit and creative play. In Sarah's room, she has a variety of different like play material. She has a play kitchen. She's got a train tracks, all these things. And it's really difficult for the students without being taught how to play with these toys functionally. So a big part of our curriculum in the autism classroom is teaching appropriate play skills so they can then go out into the inclusion setting and play appropriately with their age peers. And then the significant time engaged in repetitive movements, the self-injury, we do see that. We see that a lot, unfortunately, in the preschool of biting themselves, pulling their hair out, pulling their eyelashes, head banging, and then the repetitive motor movements or movements of objects, spinning the wheels of a car, spinning themselves. We have one student who's actually in an inclusion setting, but like literally spins like a Ninja Turtle on his back just to get that sensory input.
Okay, so why is early intervention important for children with autism? Message number one is that you cannot predict outcome in the preschool years. So again, you could be seeing signs, you don't know if it's necessarily going to turn into that, but it's always important to get them some kind of intervention early just in case. Message number two is that appropriate intervention in the preschool years makes a big difference in the outcome. And we see that on the daily, but I have also had students who came to me that didn't have an early intervention. I saw the big gap of, just like we're saying, our kids still have a lot of difficulties with functionality, but if you don't have that early intervention, they might come to you even worse off than if they did get the early intervention. So it's very, very important for them to at least, like I said, it might not turn into that, but if a student isn't speaking by the age of 3, you probably need some kind of intervention regardless. My niece does not have autism, but she spoke 0 words until 3. She got early intervention and now she does not stop talking ever. So early intervention is proven to be something that is very, very beneficial for children of any disability or not disability.
So as far as community members, staff members, parents, how to interact with children when they do have communication difficulties is understanding, like Sarah said, behavior is communication. So if they are having a tantrum or if they're engaging in physical aggression, they're trying to let you know something. Resist the tendency to talk louder or talk more. Repeating yourself over and over and over again isn't going to get a different outcome, or talking louder is not going to get a different outcome with this population.
And it actually makes it worse because you're just giving them more sensory input. Like you're giving them the
Inappropriate
sensory input,
yep.
and it just overwhelms them more.
One of the big things too is limiting the figures of speech, especially the idioms. I have I've been doing this for almost 17 years with working with the autism population, and you would not believe how many times I've had kids who were in hysterics because I said, you crack me up, and they think they hurt me. Or I had one, when I worked at a group home, I had one adult who somebody wrote on his schedule that there was going to be a dance in the living room later. And so he went at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon and just started dancing in the living room so he could check it off his schedule because he didn't understand that there was like meant a party. So they're very literal thinkers. So really limiting those idioms and figures of speech will help them better comprehend the information. And then talking slowly and giving time for them to process the information. We have a lot of different ways that we use in over in Bayberry specifically. We have a PEC system, which is a picture communication. We're in the process of getting augmentative communication devices for some of our students. And we work with the speech therapists on different ways that we can communicate comprehension to our students with autism.
Okay, so when the socialization difficulties are observed, don't assume you know how a student will respond based on your experience or their experience. So if a student is playing with a peer, don't assume that it's going to turn into something negative. That happens a lot, where even as teachers, we're kind of on standby, like, oh, what's going to happen here? Let's make sure that they're playing appropriately. And then they might, in front of your eyes, just blossom. And, so it's always good to not assume the outcome. Understand the difficulty in understanding complex social concepts that don't lend well to thinking in pictures. So sharing is a difficult, telling a student with autism that wasn't polite. What does polite mean? That's
Even just the concept of please and thank you, like it's really difficult for them to understand.
if
that.
it's not concrete and it can't be shown, really a lot of like shown to them, it kind of just doesn't make sense to them and then frustrates them and could just lead to further behavior. Remember the need to program generalization versus expecting it to occur naturally. So generalization is when you teach someone a skill. If I teach you your ABCs sitting at this podium at 7:39 with just me, that's where they're going to learn that skill and know that skill. If you don't ever teach it anywhere else, any other place, time, people, materials, they're not going to probably be able to do that skill anywhere else. That's what generalization is. So we want to make sure that we're always mixing in different materials, working with different people, different times, different places. Unfortunately, like for fully functioning adults, we can take a skill and then move on to the next area of our life, and we will bring that skill with us. It doesn't happen for people with autism that way. We have to program it in and teach to the generalization of teaching it in different ways and different places.
And then when the repetitive interests and activities are observed, just remembering that most of us have difficulty entering new situations, taking on a new job, moving to a new community, starting at a new school. But asking the students about their interests, or asking their parents and caregivers about their interests, you can then use those interests instead of having them script them in an inappropriate way, incorporate them into your learning. Have them count 8 SpongeBobs and subtract 2 SpongeBobs for your math problem instead of using, just regular numbers. If you incorporate things from their interests in an appropriate way, you can teach them that it's okay to really like Daniel Tiger, as one of our friends loves Daniel Tiger. But we want to make sure that we're using it in a way that is still progressing and making sure they're learning skills, and also using it for rapport building. Talking to, there's some students here at Valley View that are older and more communicative, and their interests might not be necessarily age appropriate, but we don't need to point that out to them. Talking to them about maybe their favorite cartoon and having them have that outlet here at school to be able to talk to somebody about that without being judged by a peer is really important to help build their self-confidence.
So when you see sensory input observed, do not assume that no reaction means no problem. So again, we have students who, I've seen students get actually injured, and they had no reaction. And I was like, are you okay? And they were like, yeah, I'm fine, Miss G. But that doesn't mean that they're really okay. I mean, definitely look, feel, figure out whether or not they're okay or not. Because there are kids who just don't feel pain, don't feel, like emotions are very hard. So something could happen that you think would probably upset them, and they're just carrying on with their day, but it really is bothering them inside. So don't assume. Big thing in our world is just don't assume. Factor in high pain tolerance and communication issues. Again, they could feel it and just not be able to express that. They may have large reactions for extraneous sensations to relatively minor sensory stimulus. So for example, one of my students jumping on the trampoline is very overstimulating for him. It's something that just spins him into this whole world of scripting and needing some kind of calm down sensory. So he has a larger reaction to a trampoline than say a gen ed peer would. Understand that fear, anxiety, and they have communication. Fear and anxiety are definitely a big part of it. And again, that's even as adults, sometimes fear and anxiety is hard for us to express. It's very difficult. It's not a concrete, he's smiling, that means happy. Anxious is very difficult to explain, but they definitely feel those things, especially in new places, new situations. And responses may give clues to motivations and frustration. So you present something and they get frustrated by it, that helps you the next time know that that's something that is frustrating to them.
So to kind of sum all that up and how autism presents itself here in Watchung Borough schools, like I said before, it's the ratio that we have for students who are actually classified as autistic That doesn't account for the students that either are undiagnosed or have a dual diagnosis and have a classification of something else like other health impaired or learning disability. But right now, as far as the autism classification, it's 1 in every 38 students. Some students with autism are in our preschool disabled class, but that is not a requirement to be in that class. But a lot of them come to us already with the diagnosis of autism. And then most of the students in our autism program already have the medical diagnosis of autism. Those 2 programs utilize the methodologies of applied behavior analysis, also like known as ABA, which is the most empirically validated method of instructing people with autism. And then we also have students here in a wide variety of different settings. We have kids with autism in our pull-out replacement program, in our in-class resource program, and then we do have some students in general education who need very little modifications and accommodations. All of our students with autism have their needs addressed either in IEPs or 504s. We do have a couple students, a handful of students that with autism that do attend out-of-district schools, and that's because what we have here in place in Watchung for a variety of reasons doesn't meet their needs due to their level of severity, and whether it's behaviors like aggression, elopement, property destruction, self-injury, or whether it is just sensory needs and it's just an unsafe place, non-appropriate placement to keep them here in public school. We also have speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, counseling, and behavior services that we offer this population. I'm here. Do you want me to do this?
Yeah, I was like,
Yep.
did you want to
Okay.
take this one?
So when I was hired and I interviewed with George and with Nicole, we kind of talked about how the role of having a full-time BCBA on staff was going to help enhance our special education program. And I really want to highlight some of the things that we had discussed and some of the things we hope to pursue in the near future. One of them is to partner with parents and CPAG to develop a collaborative hands-on restraint policy that is aligned with the state mandates. I consulted for 10 years before taking a full-time job at my last district for the last 5 years. And this is the first district that came to that has a hands-off policy that also has an in-district autism program. So I encourage the board to look at that and open the discussion around how to best meet those students' needs. Provide specialized staff training for related arts and PE teachers. A lot of the feedback I'm getting from both buildings, but primarily Bayberry that houses these 2 programs, is that our related arts teachers and our PE teachers feel like they don't have enough training to really modify and accommodate the students' needs to the best of their ability, and they're seeking out additional training. Utilizing augmentative and alternative communication systems and devices. We just brought in a specialist recently to start doing evaluations on some of our students to make recommendations on augmentative communication systems, like using the iPad for speaking, or using different ways for these students to be able to communicate without having to use some of the maladaptive behaviors. Therapy dog for emotional regulation and motivation. From what I'm told, this is something that has happened in the past, and we are looking to bring that back on a more regular basis. It not only works to help with emotional regulation, but it also is very highly motivating to this population. So it can be work in a way of, you do X, Y, and Z, and you earn your tokens on your token board, you get a visit with the therapy dog. And it can be very highly motivating for students so that we don't always have to constantly be using the devices and the iPads and the things like that as motivating. A formalized social skills curriculum. We currently have social skills groups that are run by members of our child study team, as well as our 2 school counselors, but having a more formalized curriculum that can really start in pre-K and go through 8th grade, so that we have a way of tracking students' progress in those areas, I think would be a really huge benefit. The ESY, I'm the ESY coordinator this year, and I served in that role in my last district for the past 5 years. I was in South Orange Maplewood. But we want to incorporate more camp-like activities so that, these students are coming here in the summer, and, no one wants to go to summer school. But we do understand that this is a huge need for them, because we don't want to see regression over the summer. We want to make sure they're getting their therapies and all of that. But what we have seen and what I've seen in all the other districts I've worked in is sometimes parents are reluctant to send their students because they don't want them to miss out on typical summer activities like their siblings or like their neighbors. So making sure that we incorporate some more of those camp-like activities into our ESY program. This year we have planned, we're going to do like a talent show. We have a bunch of different speakers who are coming in to do really cool STEM, like 3D printing projects. We have someone local who owns like a woodworking studio thing who's going to come in and do, you know, different kind of painted and like carved wood projects with our kids. So things that they might see. We're going to do like a field day, but a specialized like Olympics field day. Things that we, you know, they would see if they were going to the local rec camp or Camp Riverbend. Maybe not that fancy, but you know, we'll do our best. And then incorporating more community-based instruction for our middle school students. This is something that really has gone to the wayside during the pandemic for all the districts because it was really impossible to bring the students out into the community. But it's really important, especially preparing them to go into such a huge regional high school, that they have some more appropriate community-based skills on, you know, how to navigate paying for their food in the cafeteria when they get to Watchung Hills, or how to navigate, you know, taking public transportation if they are not going to be getting their permit or their driver's license down the road. Like, how do they take the bus? How would they get to you know, the train station if they wanted to go, you know, to Summit or wherever they wanted to go to. So really working on building that into the curriculum for our middle school students is important.
And even for the elementary level, just to digress, sorry. In my previous district, we took a survey of the parents at that, like, where do you go that your child has difficulties? A lot of the responses were dentist, doctor, movie theater. So we ended up going to those places and really working on the skills to make them appropriate in those places. So introducing them to the tools, having them go and visit the dentist beforehand and gain rapport. Same thing with the doctor, just them having more information before they go to those places with their parents, who a lot of the parents express like, yes, they're my child, but I don't necessarily feel I have the tools and equipment to be able to make them successful in those environments. So even at an elementary school level, things like that would be extremely helpful to not only us as a class, them as kids, but also to their parents.
And not just as a community in general. I mean, how much better would we be as a community if we had students who could navigate their own community more independently and, you know, with their friends, than having to always be attached to one of their parents or a caregiver or an aide of that kind. So that's something we're really working towards, is being kind of more inclusive with the community-based instruction skills.
So throughout the year and starting in April this year, we are creating bulletin boards in both schools. We started with April Is, and April is Autism Acceptance Month. And we had a Spirit Week in April from the 25th to the 29th, where we celebrated different days with different spirit days, like wearing our school colors, wearing tie-dye clothes for Neurodiversity Tuesday. We did hat days and what's your passion, because the characteristics of autism, like they had talked about earlier, when they are very passionate and focused about something, we wanted to express that and express that with everyone, to wear something that everyone was passionate about. So we are going to be moving forward with creating these bulletin boards for each month and having each of them be on a specific topic. So our first one was April, and the next slide, we'll go into May. And we had a few different topics for May. Our first topic was Better Hearing and Speech Month, which we work closely with our speech therapists. And some of the notes that they had given us to put on our bulletin boards included the difference between speech and language. And it says here that speech refers to how we produce sounds and words with our articulators, like our tongue, our lips, and as well as our teeth and the airflow. And language refers to the system and the symbols that we use. So our sign language and symbols that are written or spoken. And then
Also too, we're moving towards in the autism community and really in special ed community. I'm not referring to students as nonverbal, referring to them as non-speaking. Because non-speaking means that they don't have the ability to articulate, use their tongue, use their teeth to make sounds, but it doesn't mean they can't communicate. They just communicate in other ways. So I know nonverbal has kind of been the term used for students who didn't speak vocally, but we're really trying to move towards using the term non-speaking.
Like it says with language, they can speak to us with symbols. They can hand us a symbol of something that they want, or they can use the device like the iPad to touch on it for the iPad to talk for them and say, I want an apple, or I want to go to the park, and they can use that to communicate with us. We also have some tips on protecting your hearing, which are turning down the volume, wearing headphones or ear protection if you are mowing the lawn, or indoor sporting events that are really loud to help protect your hearing, and taking quiet breaks. We also have May is Mental Health Awareness Month on our bulletin board this month. And for 2022, the National Alliance on Mental Illness is amplifying the message of Together for Mental Health. May 7th was National Children's Mental Health Awareness Day. And a few of the statistics I have up there are 1 in 6 US youth experience a mental health condition each year, and only about half of them receive treatment. 50% of all lifetime mental illness begins by age 14 and 75% by age 24. The average delay between onset of mental illness symptoms and treatment is 11 years. And 1 in 5 young people report that the pandemic has a significant negative impact on their mental health. We also added some more statistics about this on our bulletin boards that we have too. And our last one for May is Special Education Week, and the New Jersey School Boards Association designated the second week of May every year to Special Education Week. That is this week. It started on May 8th and it goes until May 14th. We are having a Spirit Week this week where we are celebrating different things like our team day, Together Everyone Achieves More, where everyone wore their school colors. On Tuesday, we had a pajama day, which the kids always love, to help make dreams come true. We had Wacky Wednesday so that everyone could be their own individual. And today was hats off to differences, and it was hat day at school today. And tomorrow, which we're excited about, is Blend Together and tie-dye day, but it is also anything but a backpack day. So for the kids to get creative and to use anything but a backpack for school, to carry their school supplies and different things, to get creative with a shopping cart, or like a toy shopping cart, or a laundry basket, even a pillowcase, to try and see how difficult it is to be doing different things that they're not used to. And
I also highly suggest Googling and watching on YouTube some of the other districts who've done this. I mean, people have carried kayaks into school. People have used like a microwave, and they've carried it around all day with their books inside. It's actually pretty entertaining if you look into it.
So we always want them to stay safe as well. So nothing that is going to be dangerous, but I am excited to see what everyone does tomorrow, bringing their school supplies to school. So these are just a few pictures of our bulletin boards that we have so far. So we have one in Valley View, and then the other one is in Bayberry. Moving forward, we are, like I said, continuing each month with the bulletin board. We are going to make some of them interactive for the kids to be able to write things on them or answer questions, and we have a few different ideas in our mind of what we're going to do. But we also want to let CPAG know that what our themes are each month, and we also invite our parents to come and decorate with us as well for the bulletin boards.
And just to conclude, we would like to thank CPEG for always being supportive and open to our ideas. And moving forward, we look forward to working hand in hand with all of you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. That was
I'd
wonderful.
just like to say thank you to all of them, including Mr. Toda, for the wonderful work you do and the careers you've chosen. It's truly a gift to all of us. So thank you so much.
Amazing presentation. You put a lot, I can see you put a lot of time and effort into it. And thank you for everything you do every day. Awesome.
Mr. Alexis, may I comment? So I want to comment as a former general education teacher and also as a business administrator. This is very exciting to listen to think about those students that I've taught and to imagine if some of these resources and this knowledge was available for them when they were younger. And it's just amazing to hear how much we know and how much we can do to support students who have special needs. I think that was awesome. As a business administrator, even more so because I know what it costs to pay someone else to do this. And so thank you so much for allowing us to do this for our children here at home instead of having to send them out. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation and thank you for all your efforts here in the district. It's some great work that you're doing and I just feel like it's a really special calling and work that you're doing. I had some questions come to mind that it's not a question and answer format, I guess, but I really did appreciate the I didn't know. Not to go to, through every slide and everything that you said was really very interesting and informative. And so I, could go through it each slide, but there was just some things towards the summary portion that came to mind with I mentioning that we were in your experience, one of the only districts without that has an in-district autism program, but a hands-off restraint, no hands-on restraint policy. So is Greenbrook and Warren and Long Hill are all districts within district autism programs? Do
Yes,
they
I
have a
actually, when I
collaborative-
started here, I reached out to all of their behaviorists in all those districts, and all three of them have a hands-on restraint policy. My understanding, state mandate is that every district was required to follow their recommendations and put one together. And Watchung's actually has in there that students will be, hands-on techniques will use when students are in crisis, showing danger to themselves or others. And then there's a big bold heading at the top of it saying, but like Watchung will not follow this, or Watchung school staff cannot use hands-on techniques. So it basically has the protocol in there, and then there's just like a blurb on top that's kind of going against what the actual policy is.
And then when it comes to the 1 in 38 of the K through 8 district students in Watchung that have a formal autism diagnosis, how many of those students go on to high school at Watchung Hills Regional High School?
Our goal is all of them.
Yeah.
But as you know, as a board, we do have some students who do end up in other placements, but that's kind of where I can only speak to the students who we currently have because I just started, but really the goal is to put some of these enhancements in place to better prepare them to go into a large environment like that and be able to join that program. And Watchung Hills does have a great autism self-contained program, but they also have students with autism in a variety of different settings. So hopefully finding the right placement for our students. We don't currently have a self-contained autism program here at Valley View, but we do have students that are coming up through Sarah's room that eventually are going to need that type of placement. So we kind of have to think in advance about how we're going to build. And when her current second graders get to be in 5th grade, like they're going to need a program here. And then, eventually those same students are going to end up moving on to the high school. Because currently the kids that we have here at Valley View, for the most part, are all students who are not, well, they aren't self-contained students because we don't have that program. So they're all students who are in pull-out replacement or in general education.
Thank you. And I just, that came to mind also then, that are we currently collaborating or sharing services with the other sending districts, Greenbrook,
Oh,
Warren.
Lord.
Long-
So I live in Long Hill and I want this more than anybody else. I swear I almost want to run for Board of Ed in Long Hill just to like push this forward as a special educator. Because regardless of what we vote on as far as, combining districts, making it K-12 district, making it, just Warren joint or just, whatever the combination ends up being with, I guess they're doing some sort of analysis right now of different options. Combining special education is only going to benefit our students. This is my personal opinion. I'm not speaking on behalf of anyone but myself, but here we have very limited options because we have such a small population. So all we have is one preschool disabled class and one autism class. We don't have a language and learning disabilities program. We don't have a behavior disabilities program. We don't have a multiple disabled program, and either do the other districts. Greenbrook has behavior disabilities classrooms, but that they don't have an autism classroom. So it's almost like if every district could share and give every student what they need and focus on a specialty, we would better be able to serve the population. As I said, is we have an autism program, but not every student in that classroom has an autism diagnosis, but it's our only elementary school self-contained program. So we have to be a little bit flexible and a little creative in how we serve the needs of our students. But as like a local, like Long Hill person with a child who is, currently in the child sighting process, that's my vote. But
Yeah, and I actually came from a very large district. We had 10 elementary schools, and that's kind of how it worked, as if it were like different areas. So there were like one or two schools that were specified for having the autism rooms. And just depending on which side of town you lived on, that's the school you went to if that was your placement. Same thing with multiple disabilities. You can keep going. There was LLD, BD. So each school kind of harbored whichever classroom that they decided was going to go to their school.
and it makes staff training so
Yeah.
much more effective, because when you're talking about training PE and all the related arts teachers and even the administrators who might not be versed in a particular disability, if you have just the BD program, K through 8, then you can really focus your training on that population, because you know that the kids with autism or the kids who need an LLD program or the kids who have multiple, they're going to be somewhere else. And then that building can really focus on the needs of autism or multiple disabilities. So it makes, like, here we're in a situation where we kind of have to expect everyone to be an expert on everything, or at least have knowledge on everything. And it makes it just a little bit challenging.
Thank you so much for that. I think there may be an avenue for you to interact with the study that's currently being funded or in the process of being funded. We have not elected to participate in that study at this time, but maybe even just what you've said here, we could send a video over to Bob Morrison over at the high school board, and that could be our way of giving some input on this particular subject. But
I don't want to speak on behalf of the whole community, but that's just my.
and neither do I. I just am, very appreciative of your presentation today. And if there is some way that having these kind of questions and this information getting to the high school study in the early stages of the process, it could really bear fruit for a better study being done. And so I would encourage maybe just what was said in the meeting tonight, at least to be heard by those that will be involved in the study, even if we're not.
Yeah, and just one more thing too, because I've consulted, like I said, for 16 different districts. Some of them were K-8 districts as well. I was in East Hanover, I was in Red Bank, in different places, and they had relationships with other local school districts for tuition sending. So they might not have been able to house all those programs within their program, but they had like a set relationship where if I had a child with autism, I knew they were going to, like, from here, like I knew they were going to Basking Ridge, because Basking Ridge has a fabulous, program all the way through. I know that Watchung doesn't accept tuition students, so I feel like it's harder for us to make those relationships with local districts, because we aren't then accepting any of their students with a particular need. So that's something I think to consider as well too, is if, building those relationships, if it's not something that we're going to do within the sending districts of Watchung Hills, kind of looking at who already has established programs in place. Like we know Greenbrook has a BD program, and we know Basking Ridge has an amazing, like middle school and high school, like autism program and whatever else, but kind of looking at those and making relationships for public school tuition versus the private school tuition that you guys have to vote on, a couple times a year, just because it's much more, it's transportation's cheaper because it's closer, and having those students be able to walk the halls with neurotypical peers instead of being a completely
Yes.
self-contained special needs school is such a benefit. And if we can't do it here, just due to nothing more than the number of students we have, and then we can't have a program for every single type of need, another public school would be the next best option for them.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, I don't pretend to do well with numbers. I don't envy your job by any means. I don't want it. You can have it forever. But as a teacher, the importance of these kids being around neurotypically developed students is apparent. And I have been to schools that were only the population of autism. Yes, they're making progress, but when these kids come back to my classroom, I almost immediately see different type of progress when they're around these typically developing peers. They get more social, they get more communication, all of these areas that they lack. If they're only around peers that are having the same difficulties as them, they're not getting anything out of those peers necessarily. That sounded harsh, but you know what I mean. They need those gen ed peers to give them that communication, that socialization, that peer model. Peer modeling is so important for our students. So outside of the numbers, as a teacher, it's very, very beneficial for all of these kids to remain in district, to have those peer models for them.
And some of the things we brought up today, we feel like is going to allow us to keep these students with us for the duration of their elementary, middle school years. But as you know, from different situations that you've, been made aware of with kids who've had to go out of district, there are some things that we can improve upon as far as providing that service and enabling us to be able to keep them here in Watchung Public Schools.
Yeah, and again, without expertise on the subject, that we're, making any, real statements on the way things should go. I'm just thinking about, and it can be said across all the curriculum when you are going to a regional high school, if you can be collaborating with the sending districts on, how things are being taught. But I would think with children that are especially sensitive to routine,
Yeah.
and some of the things that you mentioned in the slide presentation there, that it would be even more helpful to have a smoother transition to the high
Absolutely.
school than even with other areas of the
Absolutely.
curriculum.
And those are the students that are going to be in school with in
Yeah.
Watchung Hills anyway. So if you
Yes.
took all of our students with autism and say, Long Hill had pre-K through 8th grade of autism, and we had the LLD program, those are the kids that are going to be within the high school anyway. So there's no negative social component or community component to them maybe not, being in a different sending district, because everyone's going to end up together anyway. And it's likely that those students are going to be in the same classrooms together when they get up there anyway. So it's almost like they're just going pre-K through 12 together with the same peers. And it doesn't really matter whether they're from Warren or Watchung or Greenbrook or Long Hill.
Thank you very much again for your time, for all your great work.
Did anyone else have any questions?
No, thank you. I was just going to say, obviously, I don't want to repeat everybody, but thank you for all your work. But it was very educational. I didn't know a lot of the facts that you had presented, so I think that's helpful for the
Thank you
community.
for being honest
Yeah.
about that. too.
Was anyone shocked about the 1 in 38 students diagnosed with
was.
autism here
I
in
was.
Watchung?
Yeah.
I had no idea that
Yeah.
it was more prevalent in males than
Yeah.
females.
Yeah. And New Jersey has the highest prevalence in the country, but also because we have the best public school system in the country. So actually, they do the prevalence at age 7, and most people get diagnosed around age 18 months to 2, and people move to the
here.
state of New Jersey.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a skew that, 1 in 35 aren't born here, but they come here. But that's also something that we need to be aware of as a community, is that these, people are going to come to our community and to our state seeking out, what is known nationally as the best special needs and autism.
So that, I'm a fanatic when it comes to statistics, because it can mean a lot of different things to a lot
Sure.
of different people. But what I was curious about that, just briefly, is the statistic skewed because the state is better at identifying?
It's better at
Kid-
educating.
It's better at educating.
So we have
Okay.
better programs in New Jersey. I've actually had students come to me from you know, a lot of them come from down south and they were like, there weren't programs, there weren't systems in
Yeah.
place, there weren't, and they come to me, and when you look at these IEPs, you do kind of see like, okay, I understand what you're saying. We do, New Jersey just kind of has it together a little bit more when it comes to how are we going to educate these students? How are we going to include them? We just kind of, I feel like, are a little bit more inclusive with them. We're, for some
More
reason, just proactive. We know that they're there. We're not going to pretend that it's not a thing. I think there are some places that are still saying like, oh, they're going to grow out of it. Like autism is not something you grow out of. So let's get on board. Let's get them programs. Let's get them educated the way that they deserve to be educated. And I think New Jersey's just kind of like ahead of the ball a little bit with that.
And I worked in this role in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Indiana as well. And in all three of those situations, I had clients that were picking up and moving to New Jersey. So I was born and raised here and I knew about our services, but in every single state that I've worked in, people were saying, oh, my kid recently got diagnosed, like I'm out of here. Like I'm going to New Jersey. I hear they're the best. And that is something that hasn't slowed down. And I've worked in a lot of immigrant heavy communities as well. My first job out of grad school was in Irvington. That was something. And, you know, majority of the families I was working with were coming from other countries. And besides like the language barrier issue, you know, they were just saying like, we heard that we needed to come to New Jersey. They knew nothing about New Jersey. And they just literally heard from whoever that you need to get out of where you are and you need to go to New Jersey in the United States to get services for your child. So, yeah.
And just a separate digression, I think a big part of April now is it's not just Autism Awareness Month. We're moving very much towards acceptance. And I think that both of those pieces happen more often in New Jersey. I think there are other countries that, like I said, are just, they'll grow out of it. That's not a thing. They'll be fine. You know, they
put
just,
them in institutions.
or they're, yeah, a lot of them get labeled as mentally unstable or crazy, as people are still calling people. So I think it's just a matter of like, we're aware, but now we're also moving towards accepting, which is the big thing that the autism community is moving towards. There's sides and everything. Or if you Google search things, we're not going with the puzzle piece anymore. There's tons of things that are going on, but it's a big push towards, okay, we're aware now. What are we going to do to accept? And I think New Jersey is just kind of, we're accepting. We're going to figure it out.
I just wanted to say, I so moved and so humbled by all the amazing work you do. It really, really not only was educational, but I was just so taken aback by the passion and
Yeah.
the sincerity and the caring you put into our students.
It's hard to be in this position, this role, and not fall in love with your children. I mean, they aren't everyone's cup of tea, but when they're your cup of tea, you drink that tea every day and you love that tea and you will never stop drinking that tea. It's just, they become a part of who we are. And I go home and think about my students. I wake up thinking about my students. Over the weekend, I'm like, oh man, so-and-so would have loved. And everyone's like, oh, why are you still talking about your students? They just become a part of who you are. And in this role, you need that passion to be able to get through those hard days. Imagine those hard days and you didn't have passion. I don't think anyone would stick around. So yes, but thank you for recognizing that.
I wanted to say thank you. And I love the community engagement part. I do know that the county itself, eventually as the kids get older, they take them to businesses, local businesses,
Yeah.
and then teach them just how to be an employee.
Yeah, and in the middle
interact.
school too, there's
Yeah.
a big push for job skills. I mean,
Right.
my old district, they were crunching numbers, they were stacking, they were sorting, they were all those jobs, they were bagging. I mean, even in my elementary school, we had every Friday, we would bring around a cart, they would sell coffee, they would collect the money, there's so many things we can do, even at my level, that we can prepare these kids to become adults that are successful in the community. Because
Absolutely.
we can do all that we can do, but if we don't move towards the community accepting them as adults as well, then we've done this work for them to sit in a home. And that's not really what we're here for. We're here to push them to be able to go be independent in the world. And so, yeah, things like that. It's so exciting to watch too. You go to these places and you see these kids like pushing around a shopping cart and you're like, look at you functioning in the world. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. And it's definitely, that's a big push that, Nicole and I talk about all the time of And then she's like, we have to get a bus driver. And I'm like, I'll get my CDL so I can drive these kids wherever we need to go. Like, I'm talking like, we need to get this going because they need it at every level. They need it at every single level
They do.
from her age all the way up. They need those skills. Those are life skills that even some of our gen ed peers could use, honestly. It's a big thing that will help them in the long run for sure.
Right. And the other question I have is I'm just thinking of how my son's going to take a shopping cart tomorrow to the kindergarten rooms. But
Yeah, that'll be fun, right? Yeah. I hope there's no microwaves. I'm going to be really honest.
I hope he agrees to it.
And that's the other thing. It's really going to turn some kids on their head and be like, well, why can't I bring my backpack? And they're going to kind of get to experience what it means when we put our students in the position of like, sorry, that can't happen today. They're going to feel that discomfort so we can talk about it and get them to be like, oh, well, that's why that student reacts that way. It's really going to be a conversational piece for sure.
And just to piggyback on how some of our gen ed students would benefit from some of these programs as well, to go back to your comment about the restraint policy, it's not really just for special needs students, especially coming out of the pandemic, we've had some students who have, had some crisis situations mentally, who have tried to elope from the building or have become aggressive. And, our staff needs to be prepared to provide them with, the most safe and effective way to de-escalate. And so it's not really just for, as we open the conversation going forward, we don't want to think about just our autism program or just our special needs population. It's really for any child who is, at risk to injuring themselves or injuring somebody else, and how can we de-escalate that situation as quickly and safely as possible.
Thank you. Ladies, thank you so much. I don't think there's anything left to say other than thank you. Your efforts are amazing and really doing extraordinary work on behalf of our students. Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
And
Appreciate your time.
thank you for being open to all of this and for really taking the information. It means a lot to us.
At our June 9th board meeting, we will have our principals' reports again delivered by our student leaders. And the enrollment reports stand at 636, 20 more than when we started the year. And that'll do it for this section of the agenda.
Thank you, George. We're going to move to committee reports. Kevin, can you please give the Human Resources Committee report?
Yes, thanks, Dory. The Human Resources Committee met on Wednesday, May 4th. Present were myself, Jen Sharp, Dory Harvey, and Mr. Alexis. First, we discussed non-tenured and tenured staff lists and the renewal of staff. Staff will be approved at current steps and salaries, but these will be updated after the new negotiated collective bargaining agreement has been put in place. Non-renewed staff will not appear on any of the attachments for tonight's agenda. We next discussed administrator contracts. The committee was in favor of approving those. We also discussed the business administrator's contract, and again, I believe the committee was unanimously in favor of approving that as well. Next, we discussed our tech support. I believe that the consensus is that we're going to reduce the amount of support that we receive from third parties, and we're going to begin relying more on our own staff and hopefully be able to save the district a little bit of money that way. There are a number of items on the agenda for tonight. Briefly walk through those. We are going to establish a district groundskeeper / bus driver position. This is pretty much just a consolidation of something that already exists. We're appointing certificated tenured staff and non-tenured staff, as I previously discussed. We are reappointing our treasurer, which we have to do every year. And we're appointing summer Title I program staff, a volunteer assistant softball coach, chaperones for the Valley View Spring Concert and Art Show, and approved certificated staff participation in IEP meetings. And those are all the updates that I have. Thanks, Dory.
Thank you, Kevin. Rich, can you please give the Operations / Finance Committee report?
Yes, I actually have two. So,
the ad hoc, the
yeah.
referendum ad hoc as
And I'll
well.
do them in chronological order. So we had a meeting of the Ad Hoc Referendum Committee on Tuesday, May 3rd. Board of Education was represented by myself, Dory Harvey, and Anthony Gracia. Administration by George Alexis and Rich Pepe. And school community groups. Borough Council was represented by Jim D'Amato, WEF by Angela Mealy, and the members at large were Frank Bisignano, Francesca Escaleria, Hans Jewett, Phyllis Jewett, Chris Panza, and Kathleen Ruperto Ferrara. Mr. Alexis actually did chair the meeting and welcomed everyone and provided an overview of the purpose and structure of the Ad Hoc Referendum Committee. The committee will work to arrive at a consensus on recommendations that will be brought to the Board of Education Operations Finance Committee. And then the Operations Finance Committee will, after giving consideration to the recommendations of the Ad Hoc Referendum Committee, make recommendations to the full board. We asked the participants to discuss 3 questions with respect to putting together a draft mission statement. What do you think the goals and objectives of the committee should be? What are the key issues you think it is important to address when considering a potential referendum? And what unique skill set, experience, or expertise do you bring that will help us to achieve the goals and objectives of the committee and resolve key issues? There were questions and comments about the prior referendum materials. Committee members provided general comments about the previous referendum projects list, as well as perspectives on why the referendum did not pass. The committee requested that the administration provide a detailed projects list along with the kitchen study report, independent engineering report, and referendum timeline for review at the next committee meeting. And I know Mr. Pepe has been working on getting those attachments in good order. And we will explore these topics at the next meeting. Future meeting dates are Monday, May 23rd is our next meeting. Then the Operations Finance Committee met on this past Monday, May 9th. Committee members present, myself, Mr. Barbella, Mr. Ingracia, Mr. Kraft, and the administration was represented by Mr. Alexis and Mr. Pepe. Our guest was Jim Finn of Brown & Brown, our insurance brokers. Student transportation update. Mr. Pepe reminded the committee that the administration was considering going to bid for a student transportation in light of the poor performance of Student Transportation of America. He reported that STA declined to offer a renewal within the state allowable 1.91% maximum increase. Mr. Pepe is working with Mr. Stiles from Watchung Hills Regional High School to put bid specifications together for a student transportation bid request for proposals. We then discussed the health benefits carrier. The committee reviewed information contained in a presentation Mr. Pepe prepared with results from the health benefits feedback form. Mr. Finn added insights from the broker and responded to committee members' questions. Based on the low response rate and the responses from Mr. Finn regarding, low response rate was to the questionnaire, which only received about 17.5% of the total eligible population responding. And then the responses that we had questions from Mr. Finn regarding the support that would be provided by Brown & Brown and the event of the transition. The committee was in favor of moving forward with the change to the SHIF. Now, this was not a decision we took lightly, and with the assurances that the programs would be at least at the level, if not better, than previous provider. And with the broker who's been with our district for 10 years and represents several hundred districts, I think it was maybe 150 districts in the state. Um, His, his response is that the program administration was better than the one we currently have, and substantial savings that will accrue both to the district and to the insured population. We made the decision that was the best course of action as a committee, and I think we were unanimous in that. There was a question about a large discussion about prescription benefits and whether whether they would be the same, because it would require a change in pharmacies from the one big chain to the other big chain, from CVS to Walgreens, and other way around, Walgreens to CVS. I'm thinking of my health benefits, which changed this year, which were the opposite. This does happen a lot in corporate America. It's happened to, I think, probably a lot of us several times. Unusual that this district has had the same healthcare provider for 20 years. So it's, understandably a big move. But we were assured that the healthcare provider would work with any of the insureds that require it to get their medication covered. And we were reminded by the insurance broker that even if a drug is covered now, there's no assurance it will be covered in the future, that they change very often. And the broker was quite confident that for whatever needs we would have, we would be able to work it out either through direct access at that pharmacy, or for later reimbursement under the healthcare plan. I asked the question if we could try to get those pre-cleared, but the answer was no, basically under HIPAA laws, et cetera, that we really weren't permitted to do that. So I just wanted to give as much explanation for that as I could. And then for the referendum in 2022, the committee reviewed the minutes from the Ad Hoc Referendum Committee and discussed feedback from the Ad Hoc Committee. Mr. Pepe informed the committee that he had begun redesigning the format of the projects list from the previous referendum. This new document was shared with the Operations Finance Committee and the Ad Hoc Committee to be used to facilitate discussion. The committee also discussed Mr. Ingracia's email from April 25th outlining projects that the administration might consider completing prior to the new referendum. The committee asked the administration to review the projects list and report back to the committee which projects could be completed without a referendum using available resources, including labor and financings. There was no new business on the Phillips Field lease shared services agreement. Mr. Ingracia recused himself from this discussion. Mr. Pepe informed the remaining committee members that the borough wishes to enter into a three-way agreement among the Board of Education, the borough, and the Little League, in which costs for maintaining Phillips Field, other than Grant Field and Blackadar Field, would be split evenly among the three entities. The committee found this to be a reasonable request and asked the administration to take the next steps to get the lease and shared services agreement finalized. That's
Thank you, Dory. I say thank you because we had an email earlier this week. We're trying to take away some of the positive that might come out of a meeting like our full board meeting was last time, where there was some negative discussion, but in trying to collaborate more effectively. I reached out because I thought it would be helpful for the full board to discuss or have some insight into what's mostly just been an operations committee so far this year that I've been on the board now, almost 6 months. And just to start by saying that I feel strongly like we should really be maintaining our schools, our facilities at a very high level. Having grown up and gone to these schools, K through 12, having had, well, K through 8 here, and then the high school, Watchung Hills, but also having my children attend these schools for a period of time. It's important to me that we maintain a high level of good maintenance and safety. And so at the same time, even before I've been a board member, I'm very aware of, that the board acts on the recommendation of the administration and of our superintendent. And so, nothing that although I do have expertise in K through 12 school construction as a general contractor, a family business that did primarily that for many decades, I am aware that we act on the recommendation of the superintendent. And I haven't heard in any public meetings before I was on the board or in our operations committee meeting, our superintendent put forward a policy or an idea that we wouldn't do any maintenance to the schools, and when I say maintenance, repairs or capital improvements to the school until a referendum is passed. But it seems like, in effect, that's what we're doing. And so I have not heard that communicated from our superintendent. If I did, I would probably, provide my assessment of that as being a negative. I would not. I would want to be on the record as saying that I don't agree with that policy if it was stated that way, but it hasn't been. And so I think that we have to try to find out what we're going to do here, especially with the summer coming, because I can just say from a quick recap, in January, there was some talk of budget goals, and I think I had brought up in the committee meeting that maybe we can go and get some of the low-hanging fruit from things that were on the facilities assessment that could be completed now that the referendum had failed. We could still go after some of these projects that I think we could probably do fairly affordably and efficiently outside of a referendum package. And, we've had about 6 or 7 meetings since then. And, I think I mentioned also maybe we could do 1 or 2 of the bathrooms at that January meeting. We have these, what was on the projects list was, that was, part of the referendum, was these 10 small bathrooms with just the toilet room and to expand them to have a sink. So I think I probably mentioned roughly some small items that I thought were very easy to and affordably could be done quickly, but maybe something a little more ambitious might have been a bathroom. But I just mentioned that because we were in the early budgeting discussions and things of that nature. So then it seemed at one point, maybe in February, that as the budget was coming together, there might be some money put into the capital reserve for some sidewalk repair. But by March, that was out, and we were really only looking at budgeting for potential catastrophic failure of a chiller for $500,000. The things that were discussed in the last meeting, really the only other items were the 2 rooftop units and then related to the PS&G program. So I don't want to take too much of anybody's time, but I just, I'm not going and walking around the schools, and I may notice things, but it's not that any of my recommendations were just coming from things that I'm picking out, pointing out. I'm really only going by what was posted on the district website at the time, shortly before the referendum vote. There were 2 facilities assessments. One, this was by DRG Architects, a facilities assessment for Bayberry Elementary School, and a facilities assessment for Valley View Middle School. So Bayberry's was 14 pages and Valley View's 20 pages. And so I just flipped through this. I had seen it when it was posted, and I, flipped through this again. And so this is, we paid DRG at one point to do a long-range facilities plan. I think we paid again to have it put in a format of a facilities assessment that could then be followed through on with the referendum. But it's now been, this assessment was written, or they're both dated October 1st, 2020. And so now we have however long, if a referendum passes, it's not guaranteed, but to me, we can't, and part of my list and sending a list with some thoughts was just to see what has maybe been done. So that's still an open question. Maybe there are some things, but in the facilities assessment, the DRG architects is pretty careful to make note of something that's been completed. So this is at least updated, it seems, until October 1st, 2020. And I'm not sure any of the items in this have been addressed since then, but we haven't really been able to get down to that level of detail in our discussion so far in the operations committee. And I do want to do the work, as was kind of pointed out. We want to do the work. I wanted to do the work of budget on this. And so just to take a few minutes, not too much longer, to go over, if you just take a look at what was posted, not looking at the detailed spreadsheet, because some of those projects on the spreadsheet are grouped into larger line items. What's nice about the facilities assessment is it's full of photos and just short descriptions of what the architects observed as they walked through the schools. And so you just go right to page 3 for Bayberry Elementary, and they have the photos of cracked sidewalks. So it's me just kind of looking at that and saying, okay, I made some notes that I think that, if you had a day with 2 laborers to do the demolition and remove the existing sidewalk, you might have a day with 2 masons to prep and pour new sidewalks. It's just for me I'm not doing an estimate of, a detailed adding cost to it, because, this is something that some of these things maybe we would go get quotes on. Some of these things on the list we might have staff. And I'm not trying to get down to that level of detail. I'm just sharing my thoughts on what I see the magnitude is on some of these things. So some of them, maybe a couple people working a couple days. There's the next one on that same page, patch the cracks in the concrete ramp to the main entrance to reduce further freeze-thaw cracking from water intrusion. To me, that seems like a 2-hour job, or it could be someone on the staff, a mason or a handy person. So again, this is what DRG architects, after 2 rounds of fairly sizable consulting contracts, came up with. I'm just sharing my thoughts. And going to page 4, we have ADA requirements. They talk about the installing detectable, the tactile warning surfaces that you see at many crosswalks and things. I made a note that, we'd want to consult to see if there'd be any maintenance concerns or snow removal issues at certain locations, but you could measure and order the material and have one day with a mason or handy person install that. So page 5 was exterior wall conditions. Power wash the brick on the northeast and northwest facades of the gym, and on the brick on one of the stairwells adjacent to the gym. I don't know if that's 1 or 2 days with school staff or a handy person or a subcontractor, as I had written here, to power wash those bricks, that exterior elevation. There was page 6, exterior wall conditions, repair parge coat on the wall of the ramps to the gym. It shows the cracked parge coat, and I thought that could be done 1 or 2 days of work. So might as well just, while we're just, I know we all want to do the work, and I'm not trying to draw this out, but I just think that you start crossing off a lot of items on this, on these assessments. One, that shouldn't be left to linger for 3 years anyway, and also that could be done affordably and efficiently, I think. But this is just me kind of sharing some thoughts on what I think the magnitude of some of these items that are in the assessment would be. And I think overall could be more economical than if they were packaged together in a large contract in a referendum. But we have the interior walls, caulk the cracked corner joint in the nurse's suite. That's 1 hour of school staff or handy person. Caulk the cracks in the CMU wall in the corridor outside the nurse's suite, touch up the paint. I'm not going to read, I'll just say 2 hours, however that's done. Interior wall conditions on page 7 talks about caulk the cracks in the CMU wall in the corridor adjacent to the media center, touch up the paint, 2 hours. Ceilings, replace any discolored or sagging ceiling tiles immediately. Some pop in and out very quickly. Some you have to cut to size, things like that. But even if you say 10 minutes per tile, there's a lot of different ways you can get that done. School staff, carpenter, or handy person. There was on page 9 a recommendation to move a piece of casework to, well, actually that was the trophy case that was to be relocated. But on page 9, they talk about the need for casework, that some classrooms have casework lacking. And so I thought part of the walkthroughs that we had before the referendum, we saw that there was unused furniture in different storage areas or in the media centers where there wasn't books on the bookshelf. And so maybe that could be repurposed if it takes a day or two or a few days to relocate that. On page 10, we have ADA issues that are noted. And so I thought if you, again, maybe that's where you renovate 2 of the pre-K or kindergarten toilet rooms, or one of those be the music room. And I gave a little more of a detail. That was almost a full page just because of the scheduling of how that would go. Just in my opinion, and something that I just felt was worth discussing in our operations committee, but it didn't seem to be, something that was really of interest to get into the details on. And there's also on that page 10 a note about the security system, and that you could just add electronic access to the door near a certain room. I won't go too much into the details of that, but it made note in there that there was a proposal that was being obtained for this and other security upgrades. So my question was, can we just take a look at that proposal if it was in fact obtained? On page 11, there was some discussion about repair and replace exhaust fans and controls in the media center, the girls and boys rooms. And could we just ask the maintenance company if we can upgrade the MERV 8 filters with MERV 13 filters? Because from what I've seen, they make them in the same size, and you could just see if they had any objections to making that switch, since that was one of the things that was discussed. Could add a couple electrical receptacles that were pointed out, and maybe you could just, in some of these things where it's making note of a media center configuration that would be more beneficial, since we don't know, when a certain amount of funding will be available, or if it will be available, maybe you could do some of the reconfigurations that they recommend now. So it was that was it for Bayberry, and Valley View School was much the same. There was a large square of concrete outside the double doors. Again, I haven't gone around to look at this list and see what's been taken care of, but it was one square right in front of the door. So that could be a day or two to demo and remove, a day or two to prep and pour. The ADA requirements, again, those tactile warning surfaces, it's really just to order in one day. It'll be it. Exterior wall conditions, power wash and or apply stain remover to exterior masonry as needed. They note in the DRG report that that's on the water table feature on the northeast side of the new addition to the building. So that seems like something that could be pretty quick for a subcontractor, especially. Probably could make short work of that. this would just be at some point, the operations committee, and from what I've seen in the past, would just be asking, discussing, and then saying, asking if the administration would be, agree with getting a quote or something like that. So it's not, again, this is not directing our administration in any way. This is just sharing thoughts that for discussion purposes within the operations committee. But it's, been 6 months or 5 months, and the summer is coming. A lot of the work that was done before a lot of us were on the board, I think 2018, 2019 summer, they had replaced some rooftop units, replaced some VCT tile, repaved the major areas of both schools. So the summer is really the time to try to get some things done more easily, less hassle for everyone involved. So just going through, there was after the power washing, there was a scrape and paint small area shown that is located in the corridor outside of the girls' locker room. There was a clean and or buff finish repair of the terrazzo tile with salt damage outside the girls' locker room. Page 7 was adjust the traffic mat if still needed, adjust the steps to the instrumental music room to make more equal height. So I think that's the traffic mat that we walk over. I'm not sure it's been adjusted, but these came through, these recommendations again came through a pretty, I would say, a high cost process of a long range facilities plan and a facilities assessment. So it's something that this is all I'm going by right now, and I'm certainly happy to hear how much of this has already been taken care of, if any of it has. We get to the peeling portions of the gym ceiling. Maybe it's just portions that need to be touched up and painted, or maybe it's the entire ceiling. But we could get a quote, I would think. Review if any unused storage furniture in both schools that might be a benefit to specific classrooms. Relocate the trophy case if in agreement with the DRG suggestion. The ADA in Valley View was such a high level of compliance that they really had only come up with adding 12 to 24-inch extension to the handrails to make compliant at the landings. So that seemed like something that could be done fairly economically. Replace an existing drinking fountain. They mostly look like they have those bottle fillers on the ones that I've seen, but look at what DRG saw. Then the front entrance, securing the vestibule. The referendum had a lot of a big line item for security, but is there any reason maybe we shouldn't consider adding a small transaction window within or adjacent to the existing door to the office, because that was one of the key components of it, and would probably not be a whole lot of work. We could change the bulbs to the stage work lighting to be LED bulbs. They might be already, but this was in the report. And some things in the laboratories, you could just add insulation to the piping and drains below the sink that don't have the insulation on it yet. You could put the privacy screens between the urinals. I don't think we have to wait for a referendum to do that. And we could replace missing insulation on the hot water piping. So I would be happy. It would be a little bit, of a, I guess, some time wasted if we heard, well, this has all been done, but we didn't get to go into it too much detail. But I don't think a lot of it has. So, or maybe none. At least none of it's been discussed in the 5 months that I've been on the operations committee. And so, there's a few more thoughts. The faculty lounge has one of the things noted in the assessment says that there's this old projection screen that's hanging there in the faculty lounge. That's on page 20 of this, right at the end of the report. So I thought, well, we could probably just take the projection screen down. Maybe we could even replace it with something else. But that was, I had understood maybe if it was the PTO or an organization in school had offered in the past to refurbish the faculty lounge with new paint and cabinets, maybe at both schools, if I heard correctly. So we should, if that offer was still on the table, we should definitely reach out about that. And then there was a storage, outdoor storage that was proposed in the referendum that I had heard that there's some people with some expertise in town that maybe feel like they could show us an option that was pretty economical too. So those are just the kind of things that I feel were not well received in the operations committee. Wasn't that long ago that I put that list out, but it just seemed like we were in this holding pattern to do work leading up to the referendum that failed because we thought we'd be including that in a package. And now maybe that there was going to be no action taken this summer and possibly just waiting and seeing what happens whenever there is another referendum. So I appreciate your time as a board. Any comments now, but just something to think about. You have my the same list in an email. And so I would like to hear what what we had talked about in the operations committee was that the administration is going to come up with their suggestions. And so I'm looking forward to it. I just I hope that there's time to, and if we're not going to do it this summer, I just recommend it for the ease of doing work when the building's not fully occupied. But happy to talk more with any member of the board anytime. Yeah. Thank you very much.
So if I could just add to that, thank you, Anthony, for the list. I don't think it was accurate to say it wasn't well received. I think that the committee just couldn't go through each administrative item about power washing a sidewalk or painting a wall or a light bulb. That's why the committee, because frankly, no one's going to answer the question, right? We don't have the details, and that's why we are bringing it to the administration for consideration. So I think the committee is asking the administration for input on these items. As you said, you weren't sure if some of them were done, if none of them were done. So that's the kind of input we need in order to have the dialogue. But realistically, for our committees to get into that level of granularity, we just don't have the information. So once the administration gets back to us, I think we can go through some of these items.
Okay, thank you, Rich, Anthony, and Joe. We're going to move on to Adam. Can you please give the curriculum committee report?
Sure, we met Thursday, May 5th, actually over at Connell Drive, right prior to a session on the tech enrichment program that we'll hear about in a little bit. First thing we discussed was that the administration is working with the high school and other sending districts to digitize the course approval and registration process for our 8th grade students. Currently, it's an all-paper process, but through collaboration and research, the process is becoming more technology-based for next year, which is just a continuation of what we've seen the administration do since they started, which has been great. At least speaking as a parent, I'm sure it's a lot easier to administer things as well. Special services update. Currently, we have 12 Gen Ed summer preschool applications, which is more than we had last year. The administration is looking at additional ways to communicate this opportunity for families. We heard a lot about Autism Awareness Spirit Week, which was a huge success. I love the fact that my 6 and almost 9-year-old came home telling me things that they learned about autism and other things. That was amazing. And to their point earlier about awareness bringing acceptance, I've been preaching that from the beginning. Awareness, understanding, and then acceptance. And I think it's just fabulous that we're seeing that. Heard about Special Ed Week. Can't wait to see all the pictures from tomorrow. Also, the results of the access testing for English language learners will be available in early June. ESY. In addition to recruiting paid staff, Mr. Toda has been recruiting a volunteer who wants to work with our students on general life skills and knowledge, including cooking and nutrition, financial literacy, and organizational planning, which I think is fabulous. And again, I think it would be great for all students. All children need to learn life skills. iReady final diagnostic. Valley View students will complete the third and final diagnostic over the next few weeks, and Bayberry will complete testing by May 27th. More information to follow. And there will be a final presentation on district goals in June. End of year promotion activities. Mrs. Kidd updated the committee on a number of, sounds to be fantastic, 8th grade events during the last week of school. Monday, they're going to have a barbecue and kickball. Tuesday evening, they'll have a celebration at Forest Lodge. And Wednesday, they're going to have breakfast and yearbook signing. And then that night will be commencement. New business, we just got an update on the Ad Hoc Committee. And at the Serve open house, we had 15 people from Watchung in a group of about 20. I hope that's it.
Thank you, Adam. Joe, can you give the policy committee update?
Sure. We met on Monday, May 9th. Although there were no items on the agenda in terms of new or amended policies or regulations, our time was spent really pursuant to the previous meetings, talking about the potential of remote board meetings in terms of community involvement. So just to recap, if you may recall, at the time, this was moved into the policy committee for consideration. We engaged with Mr. Alexis, and I want to thank you, Mr. Alexis, for your help here in terms of doing a lot of the requested research along with the administration. So just to table set where we are at the moment, one of the considerations that we had inquired about was with regard to the technology. Were we using the appropriate and secure technology pursuant to state guidelines? And, according to the research done by the administration, we are. So that's positive in terms of secure network and capabilities for the public. But I think more importantly, more interestingly, where we are is the actual, in this last meeting, the research provided by the administration in terms of our request to look at surrounding districts and what they're doing and what we can learn from them. How are they similar? How are they different? So some good news is, obviously all of the surveyed areas in terms of the research performed have now in-person board meetings. Everyone is in person in terms of the board. That's no surprise. But what is good is that the majority or nearly all of the districts, including ourselves, provide live streaming, which we're currently doing, which is also good. Where it gets really interesting, and that's what's going to be the next phase of this research and review, is the participation by the community remotely. And thus far, based upon the review of the districts, it's really a mixed bag. There are certain communities, school districts in which they do completely open in terms of public commentary during those sessions of the agenda, similar to what was done in the middle of the pandemic. Other districts don't allow it at all. They don't have it. And then yet other districts have a hybrid approach where it is allowed, but only under strict rules and circumstances in terms of participation. So what we're doing now is we've asked Mr. Alexis to simply dig into a little bit more detail in a couple of interesting districts that have this remote option to better understand how they're doing it, what are the requirements, the manner in which it's being administered, not just from an administration perspective, meaning personnel that's going to manage it for the administration if we go down this road, but also from a technology perspective. How is it managed? How is it monitored? Do we need anything special in order to do it? So once we have that information, then the next step simply is, frankly, to present it to the board. Here are the various options that school districts are using, and it's going to have to be our decision on what method we want to use. But as envisioned, I'm not too surprised. There is no commonality in terms of how districts are doing that portion of whether it's remote or not for community engagement. So I found that to be interesting. Amber, please, feel free to chime in if there's anything addition you want to.
I think you summarized
Okay.
it.
So that'll be the next step. Once we have a little bit more information, we'll share it with some of the more interesting districts, and then it's up to each board member to, provide us input based upon any questions they may have that we can answer. And then we can, I think, just take it to the public and Ad Hoc Committee to the board for discussion.
Thanks, Joe. We're going to move on to board liaison reports. Kevin, is there anything as the legislative liaison?
I have nothing for this meeting, Dory. Thanks.
Jen, is there anything for the Somerset County Educational Services Commission?
No, we haven't had a meeting, and our next meeting's June 1st.
Amber, is there anything for Somerset County School Board Association?
Yes. So I attended the couple of different county meetings, but then because tonight is the Somerset County meetings, I have their PDF from a previous webinar that I attended. So I will circulate that. That's the roles of the board roles in curriculum, and the field representative who's doing it is Gwen Thornton tonight. And I also wanted to acknowledge that the 2021-2022 Somerset County Teacher of the Year is Darren Wolsko from Watchung Hills Regional High School for biology and human biology. That's what he teaches. Then in Salem and Cumberland County, they discussed one second. A couple of things which were interesting, and I'm just going to take my notes here, were that the school ethics, they're trying to change the regulations where any conflicts need to be noted and posted to the public, and that's something they're considering. The other thing is that board member training should be within the first 60 days. And so they're looking to change that. The regionalization study, there's a grant and it's funded. So if anyone wants to apply for it, that is there. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Amber. I'll give the New Jersey School Board Association update. I'm going to just briefly go through it. So they are having an NJSBA Technology Conference on Friday, June 3rd at 9. They're having a hybrid leadership conference, Vision, Commitment, and Unity, Building Your Governance Mindset on Friday, June 3rd through the 5th. The NJSBA's Virtual School Public Relations Forum is Friday, June 10th at 9 a.m. And then they also have a podcast on conversations on New Jersey education, finding the right mask policy for your district. So finally, just another reminder that we will have our annual board goal setting occur during the June 23rd board meeting, in which we will have our board retreat. We have a topic on the board goals listed under the board business this evening to discuss. So I hope that all came prepared to discuss and offer ideas for goals and how to measure them. And please start thinking about especially the measurable goals that you're interested in creating. And I'll work with Mr. Alexis to make sure that this topic is again under the board business on June 9th. And I'll send all the suggestions to Gwen Thornton, our New Jersey School Board representative, since she is the moderator of the retreat. And just please be prepared for the discussion later and then at the next meeting. I did send an email out to Gwen Thornton about the information the board requested for the Board of a Whole. She said she will provide that information before we have our board retreat. And she will gladly discuss that and give information during our board retreat as well. So once I get that, I'll send that out to everyone. And let's see, for community engagement, I know we don't have the PTO here tonight, but Kathleen Farrar did give a report, which Jen has graciously is going to read for us.
All right, so the report from the PTO. Since our last report, the PTO is working on elections for the upcoming 2022-2023 school year. Short statements and why they are running are located on our website. Election for paid members will be held on Monday, May 16th via email. Family Fun Day at Meadowbrook Country Day Camp, RSVP here by May 12th. I'm assuming she means on the Watchung PTO website. Food Truck Friday continues from 4:30 to 7:30. Birthday lawn sign rentals continue. School store, Amazon Smile. We are always looking for volunteers, so please visit our website at www.watchungpto.com.
Thank you, Jen. I don't see anyone here from WEF or CPAG. So we're going to move on to comments from the public on agenda items. We welcome input from the public. There are 2 times during the meeting when the public is invited to speak. The first opportunity to comment on agenda items only is now. The second opportunity for public comment is towards the end of the meeting. Total time allotted for public comment is 30 minutes. Before you make your comment, please state your name and address. In the event it appears the public comment portion of the meeting may exceed 30 minutes, the presiding officer may limit each statement made by a participant to 3 minutes duration. Our public forums are not structured as a question and answer session, but rather are offered as opportunities to share input with the board. In instances where the board feels a response is needed, the presiding officer or superintendent will address the comment. New Jersey statutes do not permit the board to discuss personnel or hiring in public session. Names of students should not be used. Members of the public should consider their comments in light of legal rights of those affected and identified in their comments, and be aware that they are personally legally responsible with potential liability for comments that they make to the board. The board shall not be held liable for comments made by members of the public. Are there any comments on agenda items? Okay, so I'll move on to action items. Anthony, can you please move the administrative items?
I move A1, approval of previous minutes, previous meetings minutes. A2, acceptance of school security drill report. A3, approved placement for a special education student. A4, approved settlement agreement.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Barbella,
Yes.
Mr. Buccarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Ingracia,
Yes.
Mr. Kraft,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mrs. Murad,
Yes.
Ms. Sedbani,
Yes.
Mrs. Scharf,
Yes.
Mrs. Harvey.
Yes.
Motion's passed.
Okay, Kevin, can you please move personnel items?
Yes, I move personnel items B1, establish the following district groundskeeper bus driver position. B2, appoint certificated tenured staff. B3, appoint certificated non-tenured teaching staff. B4, appoint administration and non-affiliated staff. B5, appoint treasurer. B6, appoint 2022 summer Title I summer program staff. B7, appoint volunteer assistant softball coach. B8, appoint chaperones. And B9, approve certificated staff participation in IEP meetings.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Barbella,
Yes.
Mr. Buccarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Ingracia,
Yes.
Mr. Kraft,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mrs. Murad,
Yes.
Ms. Sedvani,
Yes.
Mrs. Sharf,
Yes.
Mrs. Harvey.
Yes.
Motion's passed.
Rich, can you please move operation items?
Yes, I'd like to move C1, approve payment of bills, C2, approve transfer of funds, C3, accept financial reports, C4, approve service providers, C5, approve agreement with Phoenix Advisors, C6, authorize municipal tax levy payments, C7, authorize district to join the state health insurance fund, C8, designate benefit risk manager for school health insurance fund plans. C9, approve termination of health benefits coverage. C10, appoint school health insurance fund commissioner. And C11, approve professional travel and related expenses.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Barbella,
Yes.
Mr. Buccarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Ingracia,
Yes.
Mr. Kraft,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mrs. Murad,
Yes.
Ms. Sedvani,
Yes.
Mrs. Sharf,
Yes.
Mrs. Harvey.
Yes.
Motion's passed.
Okay, Adam, can you please move curriculum items?
I'd like to move D1, approve Bayberry field trips, and D2, approve Valley View field trips.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Barbella,
Yes.
Mr. Buccarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Ingracia,
Yes.
Mr. Kraft,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mrs. Murad,
Yes.
Ms. Sedvani,
Yes.
Mrs. Sharf,
Yes.
Mrs. Harvey.
Yes.
Motion's passed.
Okay, there are no policy items, so we're going to move into board business. The topic we have on for tonight is the discussion of the board goals. And I just wanted to thank George for sending out the list for the 2021 Board of Education goals. So hopefully everyone had a chance to review them. I don't mind starting off just my thoughts. I really just had a couple to start off with, which was for number 2, for the negotiations with the teachers. I obviously, I'm not a part of any of that, so I'm not sure if we necessarily need that on there for next year. I'm kind of hoping we don't. So I didn't know if that needed to stay. And I did want to recommend, I think, the last time we had a goal on there for the referendum. And since we're working on that again, that would just be my advice, is to add that on again. But you're all free to discuss. Any ideas would be great.
I agree. I don't, although of course the negotiations aspects are still ongoing. To me, that seems more like BAU, not necessarily a, specific goal. It's just, doing business. Of course, we're working towards it, but I wouldn't necessarily call it as a specific board goal. It's just something that obviously we're working towards. I very much like keeping in or having the referendum. Obviously, it's taking up an enormous amount of people's time and energy. And of course, has a huge amount of additional community interest and engagement. So I think that's probably one of the largest goals we should focus on that's tangible and has a really outsized impact on the school, not just for this year or next year, but for decades. So whether it's when the next referendum comes, whether it's passed or not, will have implications. So I think that's a really important goal to focus on.
Could we just briefly read through them? The new ones I have Gwen's her memo to us from last year, but I don't have the. George's
Sure,
in front of me
I can
now.
read them for you, the ones that we had for 2021. Is that the one you're talking about?
I have that, yeah. But you said that George, the list that George put out now.
Right, that was in the board packet. It's
Yeah.
the same one. It's the
It's the
same
same
one.
as that,
Yeah,
right.
he
Okay, I
just,
just
yeah,
wanna
I
make
just asked him, just so that
Okay.
board members didn't have to locate it. Yeah, I just wanted to make it accessible to
All
everyone.
right. I would say, for me, without a specific wording or anything to it, I would like to, and we have our own vision, our own district's, goals, but I think it would be helpful if when we have the retreat, if we just kind of take a look at some of the other districts' goals, how they're worded, when it comes to things like academic achievement, things like that. So I guess if I had a comment, it would be just to try to kind of fine tune to get the focus with mentioning academic achievement and maybe something in addressing differentiated learning as a goal to just continue to strive for improvement on there too.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. I'm gonna send that to Gwen, just so that she's aware. But just so all of you know, for the past couple of years, when I've had to have this conversation with our New Jersey school rep, sometimes it's very different than the presentation that all of you get here. And, she's very strict about making sure that we focus. So if we're going to look at other districts' goals, they have to be the board goals, not the district goals. So that's where she kind of wants to make sure that we're not like deviating into that, because George might have, he's going to come forward with his ideas for district goals for all of us to look at. So we just want to make sure that we don't kind of go over into his territory. So I'm going to give that to her. And then if I think it would be productive, I know we're going to do this in June, but I think it would be productive if that's what board members want to do, start looking at other districts and seeing what their board goals are and seeing if you think any of those apply to us or we could use them. And even if you want to change the wording on some of it, that fits us a little bit better. So that's a great idea. The other one was number 3, where it says develop a collaborative shared vision. When we established that last year, when I had the discussion with Gwen, I think after we established it, after further discussion between George and Gwen, we kind of realized like we already have the vision statement that George created. So, we kind of made this goal, but then it was already done. So I think that one could probably be taken off as well because it's already been established.
Yeah, I was just thinking, going back to what Anthony we was saying, maybe have something about differentiated learning across the entire spectrum, so that there's, every child feels included and gets learning at their level. That's being tailored. And something also about what Amber you were saying, like have also more community aspect towards learning in and of itself, because we know that kids learn a lot through peer learning as well.
Okay, anybody else? We still have another meeting to discuss, so if anybody's interested in bringing more to the table, that would be good. I can start sending this to Gwen and maybe start getting a little bit of her feedback because she does work a lot. After I give this to her from all of you, she does work a lot with me on trying to craft it and making sure that all these things are measurable for all of us. So thank you guys for your input. I don't know if anybody, I don't want to cut anybody off, so I don't know if anybody else has anything to say about the board goals, but you definitely have time at the next meeting. We can talk about it again. Okay, is there any other board business to discuss? Okay, so we're going to move to comments from the public, and these are for any item. Okay, seeing that there's no comments, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you for joining us this evening. This meeting is adjourned.